Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking about data integration. It's a topic that anyone who works with multiple software tools will have thought about at some point, maybe asked for, or even attempted to create themselves. In any event, you probably know that integration is rarely simple or easy to create from scratch. My guest on this episode is Michael Bowden, technology evangelist at Esker. Esker is the sponsor of this episode, and Michael and I discuss Esker's newest integration with Dynamics 365 F&O and the choices and priorities that drove that work. Michael tells me about some of the typical integration challenges that both customers and ISVs face when working to bring solutions together with an ERP system. We also talk about Esker's long-term presence in the Dynamics ERP space, with customers going back to the on-premises AX world. Michael explains why a synchronous integration is so important for AP automation and how it benefits finance teams. And he shares some tips on getting started with Esker's Dynamics 365 F&O connector. All right. Well, Michael Bowden, welcome to the podcast. I really wanted to get right into it in terms of learning your perspective on how Esker has been working with companies moving from on-prem to cloud ERP. Can you give us sort of the broad view of that from Esker's perspective?
We're seeing all the major ERP providers try to move their customers to the cloud. Microsoft's trying to consolidate people to their new Dynamics suite. SAP is trying to get their customers into the SAP cloud solution. Oracle's trying to move people to Fusion. And we've seen that trend happening kind of slowly over the years. So I think my sense is that a lot of our customers are still using on-prem, and that's probably going to stay that way for the immediate future. But we are seeing a shift, and it seems like it's being driven from the ERP editors themselves. They're trying to consolidate their tech offerings. And, whenever that shift happens, that's going to completely call the integration into question. I mean, integrating to an on-prem solution is totally different from integrating to a cloud solution a lot of times. And so it's something that has to be revisited, reopened up. It can sometimes even be like an opportunity for a re-implementation or a new version deployment of the Esker solution. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, it's something we're seeing a lot of. I think we're seeing it ramp up in the last year. And it means we're engaging a lot more with existing customers to re-implement either just the integration or even take it as an opportunity to revisit their Esker deployment more generally.
Yeah, that certainly matches with some of the things I've observed, especially in this Dynamics space with the on-prem ERP customers hearing a lot from both Microsoft and from service providers about why to upgrade, when to upgrade, some of the benefits, or I shouldn't say upgrade, I should say migrate to the cloud, the various paths there. And they make some good cases, but always there's challenges there too. I would say integration being one of the big ones, and honestly one I don't think that I hear enough about because it's so important. What's your take on sort of the focus or perhaps the need for a focus on integration?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I made it sound a minute ago like it was just these ERP editors that are trying to move people to the cloud, but no, you're right. There's a lot of excitement to move to the cloud. A lot of on-prem ERPs are kind of feeling moldy and old, and the user interface it doesn't really line up with what you'd expect based on your other experiences of technology. Consumer technology has become so polished that people are starting to expect that more and more in the business world. And that's, I think, part of what these cloud ERPs are trying to offer is a little more sleek, modern experience. And so, yeah, there's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement to get on the cloud. And integration can kind of rain on that parade sometimes because you start to plan this massive ERP migration. You get all the ducks in a row, and then you realize, well, wait a minute, we're using all these bolt-on systems. We're using best-in-breed software for key back-end processes like Esker. You go, these are all hooked into our on-prem ERP. Those integration methods aren't going to work in the cloud. It's a totally different connection point. And so that can really put a damper on some of these projects. I think it's really important that it be brought up early on and be front of mind. I don't think it has to be doesn't have to be a showstopper, but it's just good to plan for early on in the process.
Well, let me put that to you then from Esker's perspective. Like, what has your team done with regard to connecting into D365?
I don't think I have to tell any of the listeners, D365 is the Microsoft Cloud suite of products, and their flagship kind of large enterprise ERP is finance and operations. And that's sort of the logical next step for current AX 2012 customers. even some like Great Plains customers who are moving off of that as that kind of moves toward end of life. And it's a great ERP. I've spent a lot of time in it. I like it. I can see why people like it. It feels like a Microsoft Office product. But we were just saying about all these cloud ERPs, integration's not obvious. It's not like you're working with a back-end database in the way you might be familiar with with an on-prem solution. And, we wanted to get ahead of, on the one hand, our existing customers who are on AX 2012. I've been talking to a few in just the last few weeks who want to move to finance and operations, excited for it. And we wanted to just get ahead of that, anticipate that, and make sure that they're going to have an easy transition. So they stick with Esker. They keep having the great Esker experience they're used to. And then also we want to attract people out there who use finance and operations because it's a great ERP, but like every ERP, it doesn't do everything. It's not the best at everything. And I think Esker is still really a fantastic complement to finance and operations from what I've seen. So what we did was we took a really serious look at this ERP and we thought, okay, we have a really strong integration with SAP. I think that's sort of our bread and butter. We get compliments all the time on our SAP integration. It's really baked into our product. And it's just a very good user experience. It's a very tight live integration. You have up to the minute data. When you click post on an invoice in Esker, it posts directly in SAP. It's all built on web services and APIs. And we thought, okay, we want that same quality of experience with 365 finance and operations. So we worked with one of our consulting partners and we started to investigate this ERP. And we found that out of the box, Microsoft didn't really have anything to facilitate that. They had some APIs we could call, which was great. So we can do like live up to the minute data browsing, but there wasn't really a straightforward way to post invoices. This is specifically an accounts payable connector. And so we thought, okay, we want to achieve that same quality of integration we're used to with our SAP connector. We want to have this very seamless integration experience between Esker and the ERP. So we decided to build basically an extension of D365 finance and operations. So we built some custom services that live in the ERP and they facilitate the transfer of data from Esker into finance and operations. And it's all prepackaged and I got to say, it's a pretty easy lift and shift. We've rolled it out to several customers now and I think the integration's taken maybe 5 days to get things loaded, get the right permissions created, and then we're off to the races. It's been a really good experience for us so far.
Having the ability to offer that to, like you said, on-prem customers of Dynamics AX who are using Esker today and just want to bring at least some of those processes forward without any disruption, right? I mean, because you really can't afford that disruption, and probably when you're looking at the expense of an F&O migration, anything you can do to simplify it is much appreciated, I would guess, from the client's perspective.
It's a huge load off of IT's back. I was working with one of our newly signed customers recently, and they had thought that they were going to have to write an integration into D365 finance and operations, and they were ready for that. They were budgeted for that, but we said, hey, wait a minute, we actually have this new connector we just made. Would you guys be willing to work with us to implement this connector? And they were ecstatic. IT was saying, we would way prefer to support you in rolling out this connector than to reinvent the wheel, build something from scratch. And then since we've rolled it out I think it's been a very positive experience for IT. It's the amount of work that they have to do is pretty minimal. And then any support they have to offer after that is really just sort of reading logs and giving us feedback on what they're seeing on their side. But yeah, I think that's the group I work with most closely is IT individuals, and I'm happy to see them happy.
Is there anything else that F&O partners need to understand? Anything else you're stressing to them when it comes to the value of the new connector?
For partners out there who resell finance and operations, I think our connector is a really powerful asset. I kind of alluded earlier that like every ERP, finance and operations is great at a lot of things, but it's not the best at everything. So for instance, with the accounts payable process, there's several different forms that you can use to enter invoices. And sometimes it's not really obvious, does our organization want to use this form to enter invoices? Do we want to create a custom form for invoice entry? You do click through a lot of menus. There's a bit of a learning curve. The user interface wasn't built with a specific function in mind. It wasn't built with accountants in mind or AP specialists. It was built with kind of general purpose in mind. And so that's where like a best in breed solution like Esker really shines. It's like, look, we have a very simplified unified interface for entering invoices. You're not going to a bunch of different screens. There's one validation form for your PO invoices, for your non-PO invoices. Don't have to work with the sort of sometimes arcane, difficult to implement workflow that a lot of these ERPs, and I've seen in finance and operations. I don't know that it's really specialized for workflow, but get Esker's workflow. So Esker, I think, just in general, still has a ton to offer. I mean, not least of which is like AI, data extraction, optical character recognition, machine learning. I mean, all these different technologies that we've built as a company to ease the process of data extraction, data entry, put it in a nice user interface, add on that nice workflow to then say, look, we've got this great, it's a great complement to finance and operations, and it plugs right in. It's easy to connect the two. They're going to talk to each other live right up to the minute. They're totally synchronized applications at that point. You're not relying on these like background schedules and wondering, well, did the systems sync? What time do they sync? Is it at 5 p.m.? That's all gone with our connector. It's truly up to the minute. It's all over the web. And I think the two systems work very well together.
Any other advice for Dynamics AX customers, or even mentioned GP customers who may be new to F&O and they're thinking about the future of their cloud ERPs?
Yeah, I mean, kind of along the lines of what I was saying before, I think finance and operations is a great ERP. I really like using it, but you're always I think you're still going to see a lot of value from a best in breed solution like Esker. You just don't have a lot of these things built into the ERP. I would say for customers who are moving from AX 2012 or from Great Plains to finance and operations, I would say take a look at the interface, take a look at the workflows in there, and I think you'll see that something like Esker is going to have a lot to offer. It's going to provide a lot of value: data extraction, AI, machine learning, all these great buzzwords. They're buzzwords for a reason because they're really powerful tools to have. And I think Esker has some really great offerings in that regard. And then I think our connector is really kind of an easy button when it comes to integration in that regard.
All right. Interesting. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I would just add to it that I've seen over time with F&O as it's evolved, and it has added features. It's changed the way it addresses certain business processes or the way it accommodates different user roles. But when it comes to really specific business processes or teams, like you said, users really need to measure what Microsoft can offer them out of the box versus what a best of breed can do. I think that conversation, you can't stress that enough, I think, when it comes to those decisions that they have to make, because they might find it's easy to or hope that the out of the box capabilities are sort of enough, especially, when it comes to looking at what it's going to mean for your project. But really investigating that and investigating what best of breed offers is really worth their time, I would say.
I spoke with an F&O partner recently. They're a massive F&O reseller, implementer, and they made a really good comment to me. They said, Microsoft's a huge corporation, but they don't have infinite resources, and they don't want to hire hundreds more people than they really need. They keep the bottom line in mind like anybody. And so optimizing invoice, data extraction, and machine learning and automation, these things, it's not necessarily front of mind for a company like Microsoft. And so I think that's where an application like Esker really fills an important gap and really speeds up that data extraction, data entry process.
All right, excellent. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about this and to update our listeners on what Esker's been doing in this area. I'd love to hear more in the future, especially some of these success stories as some of these Dynamics on-prem customers do go live with F&O and are, I know, every day, every week doing so. So I hope we can catch up on that and whatever else is new at Esker next time we talk.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Michael for joining me. For more information on Esker's F&O connector, there is a white paper. We have posted a link in the show notes for that. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.